On the night of September 14, 1974, 11 men were executed inside a converted tobacco warehouse on County Road 49 in Yazoo County, Mississippi. All adults, all shot execution style over a 6-hour stretch. The perpetrators? 2 brothers, James and Robert Carter. They walked into that illegal poker game armed with enough ammunition to start a small war. The FBI would later call it the most calculated rural massacre in Mississippi history. But the reason behind the bloodshed wasn't drugs, wasn't cartel business, wasn't even organized crime. It was an $8,500 gambling debt, a fraudulent land deed, and a dying father's humiliation that no one would answer for. Yazoo County sprawled across 934 square miles of Delta flatland in 1974, home to about 27,000 souls scattered between cotton fields and small towns time had forgotten. Silver City, if you could even call it a city, sat 12 miles west of Yazoo City proper. Population maybe 400 on a good Sunday when church let out. The kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did, where the Piggly Wiggly closed at 6, where the nearest hospital was a 43-mile drive down Highway 49. September in the Mississippi Delta meant heat still hovering around 82 degrees at sunset, the air thick and wet, like breathing through a warm washcloth, the smell of turned earth mixed with distant wood smoke from farmers burning off fields. At night, darkness came complete, no street lights beyond the main intersection, just porch lights here and there, and crickets so loud it felt like the earth itself was humming. Mosquitoes the size of houseflies worked in shifts. The Mississippi River ran its ancient course 15 miles to the west, and when the wind blew from that direction, you could smell mud and decay older than anyone's grandfather. 1974 was a brutal year for rural Mississippi. Watergate dominated the headlines. Nixon resigned on August 9th, leaving the country feeling like the ground was shifted beneath its feet. But down in the Delta, people had their own problems. Cotton prices dropped, small farms swallowed by agribusiness corporations. Men who had worked their entire lives watched their land slip away to banks or to men with better lawyers and fewer scruples. In that world, the underground gambling circuit wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. Every Saturday night, men gathered in barns, warehouses, back rooms of shuttered stores. They played poker, shot craps, bet on anything that could be measured or timed. The Dixie Mafia, loose, chaotic, but everywhere, took their cut, provided protection, kept the local law at bay. Deputies making $6,800 a year could be convinced to take Saturday night off for the right price. In Yazoo County, the biggest game ran in Turner's warehouse on County Road 49. Stakes high enough to matter, not so high you'd attract federal attention. A game where a man could lose his truck or win enough to make his mortgage payment, where handshakes still meant something, where your word was your bond. At least that's what everyone believed, until it wasn't. James Lee Carter turned 34 that June, 6'1", lean from hard work and skipped meals, shoulders broadened from years of hauling hay and fixing farm equipment. A handyman, a mechanic, a man who could repair damn near anything if you gave him time and tools. He had married young, 19, before shipping out. That marriage didn't survive his return. By 1974, he lived alone with his father, Samuel, 68, dying slowly from emphysema, each breath a rattling struggle. Samuel had worked 43 years at the cotton gin, inhaled enough dust to fill a silo, and now sat by the window with an oxygen tank hissing beside a mechanical Cobra. What James valued most wasn't money. He'd never had much of that. What he valued was respect, the kind that came from keeping your word, paying your debts, standing up when a man needed standing up. His father taught him that, his grandfather before him, 3 generations of Carter men who believed honor wasn't just a word, it was how you lived. By the summer of 1974, that honor was being tested. Samuel Carter owned 180 acres of Delta farmland, free and clear, or so everyone thought. Land homesteaded in 1919, land meant to pass to James and his younger brother Rod.
But medical bills piled up. 3 hospitalizations in 2 years. Somewhere along the way, Samuel borrowed money, using the land as collateral. James didn't know the details. His father was proud, wouldn't discuss it, but he knew something was wrong. Samuel stopped sleeping, spent hours staring at papers spread across the kitchen table, muttering in a hoarse voice no one could understand. Robert Franklin Carter, Bobby, was 29 that September, 5 years younger than James, stockier, mechanic at Johnson's garage, married to Rita McKinney, father to 3-year-old Sammy. Bobby worshipped his older brother, always had. When James said jump, Bobby asked how high. That kind of loyalty ran deep. The brothers shared one more thing, the Saturday night poker game at Turner's warehouse. James was patient, calculating. Bobby was reckless, betting on feelings more than cards. Together, they were regulars, known quantities, men who paid their losses and collected winnings without drama. That's where they met Lester "Lucky" Haynes, 41 years old, never worked an honest day in his life, slicked back hair dyed jet black, polyester suits, platform shoes, gold rings on every finger, smelled of English leather cologne. Lucky ran the poker game, organized it, took his cut, kept the Dixie Mafia satisfied. His word was supposed to mean something. For 18 months, Lucky Haynes and Samuel Carter had been doing business. James didn't know the full story, wouldn't know until it was too late. But the outline was simple. Samuel needed money for medical bills. Lucky said he could help, a friend who made private loans, easy terms, no questions asked. Samuel signed papers. And with one signature, Samuel Carter set in motion a debt that would drown his sons in blood. Money changed hands, and somewhere in that transaction, Lucky Haynes did what he always did, found an angle, worked a scheme, and made sure he came out ahead. The explosion came on Friday, September 6, 1974, just after 2 in the afternoon. James was under the hood of his truck, replacing a fuel pump that had finally given up after 140,000 miles of Delta roads, when he heard his father's scream. Not a yell, a scream. The kind of sound a man makes when something inside him breaks. James ran into the house. Samuel stood in the kitchen, clutching a letter, his face the color of old newspaper. The oxygen tank hissed beside him, but Samuel wasn't using it. His chest heaved like a broken engine trying to start. "They're taking it," Samuel wheezed. "They're taking the land." The letter was from a law office in Jackson, official letterhead, legal language James had to read 3 times to understand. The meaning was clear. Samuel Carter's land, all 180 acres, had been signed over to Lester C. Haynes as payment for a debt of $12,300. The transfer was legal, the deed recorded, the land gone. "I didn't," Samuel gasped, sinking into a chair. His voice broke, his chest failed. James called Bobby, then called an ambulance. By the time it arrived, Samuel had suffered a heart attack. Not massive, but enough. At the hospital, after doctors stabilized him, Samuel told his sons the whole story. How Lucky had approached him 18 months earlier. How the loan had seemed simple, $8,500 at 15% interest due in 12 months. How Lucky explained the land deed was just a formality, banks required, but nothing that would ever come to pass. Samuel trusted him because Lucky was a regular at the Saturday game, because men who played poker together looked out for each other, because in Yazoo County, your word was supposed to mean something. But Lucky Haynes's word meant nothing. He structured the loan so that when Samuel couldn't make payments, and Samuel couldn't, not with hospital bills eating everything, the land transferred automatically. Legal, clean, final. Samuel couldn't read legal documents worth a damn. He signed papers he didn't understand, trusted a man in a polyester suit that smelled of cheap cologne, and now the Carter family land was gone. James and Bobby sat in the hospital parking lot until after midnight, silent, just sitting in James's truck with the windows down, listening to crickets and the occasional car on Highway 49. Finally, Bobby spoke. "We have to do something." James lit a cigarette. The flame from his Zippo briefly illuminated his scarred face. The line through his eyebrow looked like a crack in stone. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we do." What Lucky Haynes didn't know, what nobody in Yazoo County knew, was that James Lee Carter had spent 13 months in Vietnam learning how to end human lives with mechanical efficiency. Skills the Army had drilled into him, skills he had buried deep, tried to forget, tried to replace with farming and fixing engines. But some things, once learned, never go away. They wait. And on September 6, 1974, in a hospital parking lot that smelled of asphalt and diesel fuel, those skills woke up.
The Saturday night poker game at Turner's Warehouse ran every week. Tomorrow was Saturday. Lucky Haynes would be there. So would everyone who sat at that table and watched him smile while he destroyed a family. So would the Carter brothers. The week between Samuel's heart attack and Saturday, September 14th, moved with the strange, slow quality of a dream where you know something terrible is coming but can't wake up to stop it. On Sunday, Bobby came by the farmhouse. James sat in the kitchen, staring at the legal papers spread across the table, the deed transfer, the loan documents with Samuel's shaky signature, all of it legal, all of it a lie wrapped in lawyer language. Bobby brought his son, Sammy, 3 years old, clutching a toy truck. Innocence in motion. "Uncle James, look," the boy said, holding up the red truck. "It goes fast." James picked him up, held him close. Sammy smelled of baby shampoo and grape jelly. His small hands patted James's scarred face with complete trust, the kind of trust that believed adults could fix anything. "That's a good truck, buddy," James whispered. "Go show your daddy." Bobby watched from the doorway. He recognized the look in his brother's eyes, the same look James had worn before shipping out to Vietnam, the look of a man who had already made a decision. "We going to do something about this?" Bobby asked quietly. "Yeah, we are." By Monday, everything had changed. James tried the legal way first. He drove to the Yazoo County Sheriff's Office, spoke with Sheriff Tom Beckworth, told him about the loan, the fraud, the land. Beckworth listened, sighed. "Son, if the papers are legal, if your daddy signed them, you need a lawyer, not a sheriff." "With what money?" asked James. "I'm sorry, but Lucky pays his taxes, has friends. My advice, forget the land, move on." James walked out at 11:23 a.m., the sun burning holes through his shirt. The law wouldn't help. He had known it before he walked in, but some part of him had needed to try. On Tuesday, James drove 50 miles south to Vicksburg, found what he was looking for in a pawn shop on Washington Street. The shop smelled of gun oil and desperation. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "Looking for a .45, James said. The man behind the counter pulled out a Colt 1911 Korean War surplus. James held it, felt the weight, checked the action. Solid, reliable. "I'll take it, and 2 boxes of ammunition." Paperwork filled, ID shown, all legal, all traceable. James didn't care. This wasn't about getting away. This was about making things right. He paid $247 cash, the pistol wrapped in brown paper, ammunition in a plastic bag. On Wednesday, James visited his father. Samuel was weak, tubes running from his arms, oxygen mask muffling his words, his face gray, papery. "Don't do nothing stupid, son," Samuel whispered, gripping James's wrist with surprising strength. But James Carter had already crossed the line in his mind, and Saturday night was waiting. "The land ain't worth dying over." "I'm not going to die, Daddy. That ain't what I'm worried about." Samuel's eyes were clear, cutting straight through his son. "I know that look. Saw it on my own daddy's face once. Man gets that look, people end up in the ground." James wanted to promise he'd let it go, walk away, be the bigger man, but he had never lied to his father, and he wasn't going to start now. "Lucky Haynes stole from us," James said quietly. "Robbed you in broad daylight with a smile on his face, and the law says that's fine, that's legal, that we should just take it and move on. But I can't do that. Some things you don't walk away from." Samuel closed his eyes. A tear ran down his weathered cheek. "Then do what you gotta do," the the old man whispered. "But keep Bobby out of it. He's got a boy, got a future. Bobby makes his own choices, Daddy." The machines beeped and hissed, counting down what little time Samuel had left. That night, Wednesday, September 11th, James sat at his kitchen table with maps of Yazoo County spread out, marking locations with a pencil. Turner's Warehouse on County Road 49, the route to Highway 49, back roads that could serve as alternates, distance from the nearest sheriff's substation, 18 miles, response time if someone called it in, 20 minutes minimum. At 8 p.m., Bobby arrived, parked his truck beside James's, walked in without knocking, saw the maps, the gun wrapped in brown paper, the boxes of ammunition stacked neatly beside it. "This Saturday?" Bobby asked. "This Saturday. You sure about this?" James looked up at his younger brother, 29 years old, a wife who loved him, a son who needed him. He could still walk away, should walk away. "You don't have to be part of this. I can do it alone." Bobby pulled out a chair, sat across from him. "You remember when I was 7 and those Harmon boys jumped me after school, beat me so bad I couldn't see out of my left eye for a week?"
James remembered. He had been 12, had found Bobby crying in a ditch. "You remember what you did?" Bobby continued. "I took care of it. You put both of them in the hospital. Dad had to pay their medical bills. You got suspended for 2 weeks, but you did it anyway, because that's what brothers do. They don't let people hurt their family and walk away." Bobby stood, looked out the window into the darkness. "Sammy asked me yesterday if Grandpa Samuel was going to die. I told him no. Told him Grandpa was strong. But he ain't fine. He's dying because Lucky Haynes robbed him, and the stress broke his heart. And in a few years, when Sammy's older and asks me what I did about it, I ain't gonna tell him I stood by and did nothing." James felt something tight in his chest loosen. He had been prepared to do this alone, ready to carry it all himself, but having Bobby beside him made the weight bearable. "All right then," James said. "We do this together." They spent 2 hours going over the plan. Who would be at the poker game? Lucky Haynes for sure. 7 or 8 regulars. Maybe Deputy Marcus Webb, who took Lucky's money to look the other way. The layout of Turner's Warehouse, 1 main room, 1 back door, windows too high to climb through. The weapons: James' Colt 1911, Bobby's hunting rifle, and a shotgun borrowed from Cousin Raymond. At 11:47 p.m., Bobby drove home to his wife and son. James sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the maps, the gun, the choice he had made. He thought about Sammy's small hands on his face, about his father in that hospital bed, about 3 generations of Carter men who had worked that land, bled into that soil, believed that if you kept your word and worked hard, the world would treat you fair. Lucky Haynes had proven that belief a lie. James could still stop, throw the gun in the river, burn the maps, pretend he had never planned any of this, live the rest of his life knowing he had been robbed and done nothing. Watch his father die in shame. Tell Sammy someday that when bad men do bad things, good men just accept it. No. Some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. Some debts can only be paid in blood. At 1:30 a.m. on Thursday, September 12th, James finally went to bed. Lay in the darkness, listening to the old house settle, crickets singing outside, a dog barking in the distance. He didn't sleep, just watched shadows move across the ceiling, knowing that in 2 days everything would be different. Friday evening, Bobby came by one last time, not to plan, not to prepare, just to sit on the back porch with his brother, drinking Budweiser from cans, sweating in the humid air, watching the sun sink into soybean fields like a copper coin dropping into dark water. They didn't talk about Saturday, didn't talk about the warehouse. Instead, they talked about childhood, summers that lasted forever, catfish in Blandon Creek, the snapping turtle scar, their father's laughter. At 9:15 p.m.,
Bobby stood. I should get home. Rita's making breakfast. Wants me to take Sammy to see Daddy at the hospital. That's good. Daddy would like that. Bobby paused at his truck. James, after tomorrow, nothing's going to be the same. You all right with that? James looked out at the land that belonged to his family for 55 years, now stolen by a man who had never worked a day in his life. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm all right with that. Bobby nodded, drove away, taillights disappearing down the dirt road, leaving James alone on the porch. At that same moment, Lucky Haynes was at the Elks Lodge in Yazoo City, drinking bourbon, laughing about how he had just acquired 180 acres of prime Delta farmland for $12,000. His Cadillac gleamed in the parking lot, waxed and perfect, a monument to a man who believed he was untouchable. He had no idea that 24 hours later, he would be dead on the floor of Turner's warehouse, surrounded by 10 other men who had made the mistake of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Friday morning, September 14th, dawned clear and hot. The sun rose over Yazoo County, indifferent to human anger, human justice. James woke up at 5:15 a.m., made his coffee, smoked his 2 cigarettes. Everything the same as every other morning, except for the pistol wrapped in brown paper on the kitchen table and the knowledge that by this time tomorrow, he would either be in jail or dead. At 8:47 p.m., James and Bobby climbed into James's pickup truck, a 1968 Ford F-100, dark green, cracked windshield, 143,000 miles. In the truck bed, wrapped in canvas, a Colt .45 pistol, a 12-gauge shotgun, a .30-06 hunting rifle, and enough ammunition to end 11 lives. At 9:47 p.m., Bobby arrived at Turner's warehouse. The converted tobacco barn sat 200 yards off the main road, rusted siding, a single bare bulb over the entrance. Inside, voices carried, laughter, cards shuffling, bottles clinking. James sat in the truck, hands on the wheel. His mouth tasted like copper, his heartbeat steady, slow, the same cold clarity he had felt in Vietnam.
Bobby sat beside him, rifle across his lap, hands trembling. This was different from planning, different from talking. This was real. You ready? James asked quietly. Bobby swallowed hard, nodded. Yeah, I'm ready. Remember, we lock the doors first. Nobody leaves, nobody calls for help. I remember. James picked up the .45, checked the chamber for the 10th time. 7 rounds. 2 spare magazines in his jacket pocket. Enough. More than enough. Bobby, after tonight, nothing's the same. You understand that? I understand. James looked at his younger brother, wanted to tell him to stay in the truck, drive away, save himself. But Bobby had made his choice. They had made it together. And as the Carter brothers stepped toward the warehouse door, the night held its breath. Then let's finish this. They climbed out of the truck. The sound of crickets filled the night so loud it seemed like the earth itself was screaming. James's boots crunched on gravel as he approached the warehouse. Through a gap in the siding, he saw them. 8 men gathered around a makeshift poker table built from sawhorses and plywood. Lucky Haynes sat with his back to the door, tan suit jacket clinging to him even in the heat, gold rings catching the light. To his right sat Deputy Marcus Webb, still in uniform, his service revolver resting casually beside a beer bottle. The others were regulars, farmers, mechanics, men James had known for years. They laughed, money sliding across the table. James reached the door. His hand touched the knob. Last moment, last chance to turn back, drive home, forget this madness. He thought of his father in that hospital bed, tubes and machines keeping him alive while his heart gave up. Thought of 3 generations of Carter land stolen with a smile and legal paperwork. No. James opened the door. The laughter died. 8 men looked up. Recognition dawned, confusion, then understanding, then fear as they saw the pistol in James's hand and Bobby behind him with the rifle. "Nobody moves," James said. His voice was calm, dead calm. "Bobby, lock that back door." The metallic slide of the bolt echoed in the silence. Lucky stood slowly, hands visible, salesman's smile faltering. "James, Bobby, fellas, what's this about? We got a problem here?" "Sit down, Lucky." "I said sit down." Lucky sat, the smile gone. The others froze, poison spreading through their thoughts. Deputy Webb reached for his revolver. James's .45 was faster. 9:51 p.m., the first shot thundered through the warehouse. Webb fell backward, his hand inches from his gun, body hitting the concrete like a sack of grain. The room erupted. Vernon Tucker, soybean farmer, lunged for the front door. Bobby's rifle barked once. Vernon stumbled, fell, didn't rise again. "Nobody else moves," James said louder now, the .45 sweeping across the table. Dale Morrison stood anyway, 33, married, 2 kids, a neighbor, a man James had known for 15 years. "James, Jesus Christ, you can't." "You can't what, Dale? Can't watch my family get destroyed while good Christian men look the other way?" Dale's eyes flicked to the back door, calculating. James saw the thought forming. "Don't," James warned quietly. Dale ran anyway. 5 steps. Bobby's rifle spoke again. Dale dropped face first, hand outstretched toward freedom he'd never reach. 3 down, 8 to go. James felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not the killing, but the void where conscience should be. He had become a machine, processing problems, eliminating obstacles. Lucky sat very still now, sweat soaking his tan jacket. The rest shuffled to the corner. Tommy Briggs, Ray Sutton, Carl Hendress, Wayne Palmer, huddled like cattle in a storm. 10:03 p.m. The warehouse smelled of tobacco dust, tobacco smoke, and blood. The single bulb swayed, shadows dancing across walls that had seen 50 years of farming and now witnessed slaughter. "You know why you're here. Every one of you sat at Lucky's table. Every one of you knew what Lucky did to my family. Some of you helped, the rest just looked away." Tommy Briggs spoke, voice shaking. "I didn't have nothing to do with your daddy's land. I just came to play cards." "You were here when Lucky bragged about it. You laughed." "I didn't mean..." "Didn't mean what? My father's dying, Tommy. That land was all he had left, and Lucky took it with paperwork and lies, and every man in this room knew." Carl Hendress stepped forward, big man, steady voice. "You're right. What Lucky did was wrong, but killing us won't bring your land back, won't save your daddy. All it does is make you a murderer." James remembered Carl helping pour the barn foundation in '68, sharing whiskey at Christmas, thought he was a good man. "You're right," James said quietly. "It won't bring anything back, but it'll make sure Lucky never does this to another family, and it'll make sure every man who laughed at my father's suffering pays for that choice." Ray Sutton's voice cracked.
"We got families, James. Kids, wives. You know us. I know my father had a family too. Didn't stop any of you." 10:14 p.m. 3 miles away, Betty Thompson closed the Piggly Wiggly, hummed along to Ain't No Sunshine, counted the register, unaware that 11 families were being destroyed in the darkness beyond town. Lucky finally spoke, his voice stripped of confidence. "James, listen, the land, I can give it back. Tear up the deed. Your daddy can have it all. Just let us go, please." James turned to him, polyester suit, gold rings, pomade-slicked hair, the predator who had robbed a dying man. "You think this is negotiation? You think there's a deal to be made? I can fix it, I swear." "You can't. It's too late. My father had a heart attack because of you. He's dying knowing he lost everything. You can't fix that, Lucky." Lucky's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I didn't think." "No, you didn't think. You saw an old man who couldn't read legal papers. You saw profit. You're a predator. Always have been. The only difference is tonight, you ran into something worse." Wayne Palmer, 26, youngest of the group, broke for the door, desperate speed. Bobby's rifle tracked him. The shot echoed. Wayne fell 3 feet from the handle, close enough to touch it, far enough that it didn't matter. 4 down, 7 to go. Carl Hendricks steadied his voice. You'll have to live with this every day. See our faces, hear our voices. You'll never sleep again. That's a heavy weight. I know, James said. So why do it? Because some deaths can only be paid in blood. Because the law won't protect decent people anymore. Because if I don't, men like Lucky will keep destroying families. That's not justice, Carl whispered. That's revenge. I know the difference. Don't care anymore. 10:27 p.m. Bobby stood near the back door, rifle heavy in his hands. Thought of Sammy asleep at home, Rita wondering where he was. Thought of the man he had been yesterday and the thing he was becoming tonight. James, Bobby said softly, we don't have to do all of them. Webb was armed. Lucky's the main one. The others, we could let them go. James didn't turn. They all made their choices, Bobby. They all knew. They laughed when Lucky bragged. You want to let that slide? Bobby didn't answer. The rifle felt heavier than it ever had during deer season. And as the bulb swayed above them, the Carter brothers faced the moment where vengeance became massacre. Ray Sutton dropped to his knees. 43 years old, ran a feed store on Highway 49, father of 3 daughters, husband to a woman who sang in the church choir. Please, he whispered, I got kids, 3 little girls. They need their daddy. I'll do anything. I'll sign over my store. I'll give you everything I have. Just don't. James walked towards him. Your daughters will cry. Your wife will grieve. They'll hurt for a long time, but they'll survive. They'll move on, find a new normal. That's more than you gave my family. I didn't do nothing to your family. You did nothing. That's the problem. Evil wins when good men do nothing. You knew what Lucky was. You all knew. And you sat here every Saturday night, taking his money, enjoying his hospitality while he destroyed people. Ray's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks. I'm sorry. God help me, I'm sorry. God's not here tonight, just us. 10:33 p.m. The shot echoed. Ray Sutton fell sideways, landing with his head on a burlap sack of fertilizer. His eyes stayed open, staring at nothing. 5 down, 6 to go. Tommy Briggs tried to run, not towards the doors, but towards a stack of old tobacco crates, thinking maybe he could hide, maybe survive until dawn. Bobby's rifle tracked him lazily. The shot came before Tommy reached the crates. His body collapsed into them, sending wood clattering across concrete. 6 down, 5 to go.
Carl Hendricks and Lucky Haynes stood side by side now, near Wayne Palmer's body. Carl had stopped negotiating. Shoulders squared, eyes steady, looking at James with something like pity. You were a good man once, James, Carl said quietly. I remember when you came back from Vietnam. You were different, but you were trying to be normal, trying to build something decent. What happened to that man? James felt something crack inside his chest. The world ground him down, took everything he built, everything he believed in. Banks, lawyers, men he thought were friends. The system crushed him until there was nothing left but this. So this is what's left, a killer. This is what's left when decent men have no other options. Carl nodded slowly. Then I'm sorry for you, because you'll spend the rest of your life in a cage, knowing you became the thing you hated most. I know. Was it worth it? James looked at Lucky Haynes, crying now, all swagger gone, reduced to a small man in a cheap suit who had played with lives like poker chips.
Ask me in 20 years, James said. 10:41 p.m. Carl Hendricks died standing up, facing it straight on. His body fell with a heavy thump that shook the warehouse. 7 down, 4 to go. Lucky collapsed to his knees, all pretense gone. "Please," he sobbed. "Please, James, I'll do anything, anything." James stood over him. The .45 felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His hand didn't shake. That was the terrible thing. It was perfectly steady. "You know what the worst part is, Lucky? It's not that you stole our land, not even that you destroyed my father. It's that you thought you'd get away with it, thought you were untouchable, thought men like me would just take it." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're scared. That's different." Lucky looked up, tears cutting tracks through sweat. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. There's nothing you can say that matters anymore." James stepped back, raised the pistol. Lucky closed his eyes. 10:44 p.m. The shot echoed one final time. 8 down, 3 to go. But James was wrong. There were supposed to be 8 men at the game. The FBI would later discover 3 more had arrived late. Jerry Coleman, 51, Patrick Walsh, 37, and Michael Dunn, 18, Jerry's nephew. They had waited in Jerry's car, unaware of the slaughter inside. 10:47 p.m. Jerry opened his car door just as James and Bobby walked out. Their eyes met across 30 feet of gravel. Jerry saw the guns, saw the blood, understood everything. "Run!" he screamed. The 3 men scattered. Patrick Walsh sprinted toward the cotton fields, 15 yards. Bobby's rifle found him. He fell face first into the earth. Michael Dunn ran toward the tree line, fast, terrified. He might have made it, but his foot caught on a root. He fell hard, scrambled, looked back, and saw James Carter standing there, .45 aimed at his chest. "Please," Michael whispered, "I'm just a kid. I don't even know what's going on." James saw his own sons in that face, saw every boy caught in something beyond his understanding. The ice around his heart cracked wider. Wrong place, wrong time. "I won't tell anyone, I swear." "I'm sorry, son." 10:49 p.m. The shot echoed across the cotton fields. Jerry Michael Dunn fell backward, eyes wide with shock. 10 down, 1 to go. Jerry Coleman ran toward the warehouse, desperate. James caught him at the door. "James, listen, I know you. You're not a killer. It's not too late. 1 survivor, that's all you need. Let me live. I'll tell them it wasn't murder. I'll say Lucky pulled a gun first." "There were 8 men in there, Jerry. Nobody's going to believe 1 survived by accident." "Then make it look like I escaped. Give yourself a chance." "I don't want a chance. This isn't about getting away. It's about making sure everyone knows what happens when you destroy a decent family, about sending a message that some men won't go quiet." "That's insane." "Maybe, but it's too late to be anything else." 10:52 p.m. Jerry Coleman fell, the last of 11 men who had made the mistake of being connected to Lucky Haynes on the wrong Saturday night. James stood in the parking area, .45 hanging at his side. The warehouse light burned behind him, bodies scattered across gravel and dirt. His hands steady, killer's hands. Bobby walked up beside him. "It's done." "Yeah. What now?" "Now we go home. We wait for them to come." They climbed into James's truck. Neither spoke. Bobby's rifle lay across his lap. James's pistol sat on the bench seat. The engine rumbled. They drove away, leaving 11 bodies and a crime scene that would make national news. James glanced in the rearview mirror. The warehouse light shrank into darkness. He thought of his father, dying without knowing his land had been avenged. Thought of Sammy, who would grow up knowing his father and uncle were murderers. Thought of all the lives destroyed, not just the 11 dead, but their families, their children. The weight settled on his shoulders heavier than anything he had carried in Vietnam. At 11:03 p.m., they arrived at the Carter farmhouse, porch light on, kitchen smelling of coffee and old wood. Everything looked normal. Everything was different. James set his pistol on the table. Bobby placed the rifle beside it. 2 brothers who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed.
"How long you think we got?" Bobby asked. "Dawn. Maybe someone finds them by morning. FBI'll be here by noon." Bobby nodded, walked to the phone. "I should call Rita. Tell her—" He stopped. What could he say? "Tell her you love her. Tell her you're sorry. Tell her to explain to Sammy that his daddy tried to do right, even when right looked like wrong." Bobby picked up the phone. His hands shook, adrenaline fading, reality crashing down. He dialed. Rita answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby," he said, his voice breaking. "I need you to listen to me." James walked out onto the back porch, sat in his father's chair, lit a cigarette with hands that felt final.
And as smoke curled into the night sky, the Carter brothers waited for dawn and for judgment. The night air smelled of turned earth and distant rain. Crickets sang their endless song. The world kept turning, indifferent to human tragedy, indifferent to the 11 families that would wake tomorrow shattered. James thought about Sarah and his unborn grandchild, thought about Margaret, who had been a good wife all those years, thought about his father, who had taught him that honor meant something, that a man's word was his bond, that you stood up for what was right. Samuel Carter had been right about all of it. The world just didn't care anymore. At 11:17 p.m., sitting on that porch under a moon that would witness his last hours of freedom, James Carter cried for the first time since Vietnam, not for the men he ended, not even for himself, but for the version of James Carter who had believed the world made sense, who thought honor mattered, who tried so hard to be decent in an indecent world. That man was dead, had died tonight in Turner's warehouse. What remained was just the husk, waiting for consequences, carrying the weight of 11 lives ended and countless more destroyed. Inside, Bobby finished his phone call, came out to the porch, sat beside his brother. They didn't speak, just sat as the night deepened, as the moon climbed higher, as the last hours of their old lives ticked away. 6:47 a.m., Sunday, September 15th, 1974. A passing truck driver saw bodies in the parking area of Turner's warehouse. He radioed for help. By 7:15 a.m., Yazoo County Sheriff Tom Beckworth stood inside that warehouse, staring at 8 dead men and a crime scene that would haunt him forever. By 8:30 a.m., the FBI had been notified. By 9:15 a.m., federal agents and state police surrounded the Carter farmhouse. James and Bobby walked out with their hands raised. No resistance, no drama. Just 2 brothers who had done what they believed had to be done, and now faced what came next. But the blood had been shed. The message had been sent, and for years afterward, in quiet conversations in Mississippi bars and around kitchen tables, people would talk about the night when Lucky Haynes's greed finally found its reckoning, when 2 brothers decided the law had failed and justice required blood, when 11 men paid the price for a system that had stopped protecting decent people. The Carter brothers would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Samuel Carter would die 3 weeks later, never knowing what his sons had done in his name. Rita would raise Sammy alone, telling him his father had been a good man pushed too far, and Turner's warehouse would stand empty for decades, a monument to the night when desperation, honor, and violence collided in the Mississippi darkness. 6:47 a.m., Willie Jameson, truck driver, veteran, father of 4, grandfather of 2, was running late. A blown tire had cost him 2 hours. He took County Road 49 as a shortcut. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the Delta sky orange and pink. A beautiful morning, cool for September. Gospel music played on his radio. He thought about ham and eggs waiting at the Yazoo City truck stop. Then he saw the bodies. 3 men lying in the gravel. Too still, too wrong. Angles no living body makes. Willie slowed his rig, pulled onto the shoulder, hands shaking. Should he stop?
Should he keep driving? What if whoever did this was still there? But Willie was a decent man, raised Baptist, taught that when you see trouble, you help, even if they're beyond helping. He climbed down, gravel crunched under his boots. The smell hit him, copper and waste, the stink of violent death he had smelled once before in Korea. He turned, saw the warehouse door open. Inside, 8 more bodies. Willie vomited into the dirt, ran to his truck, grabbed his CB radio with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Breaker, breaker, this is Big Willie on County Road 49. I need police. Sheriff, FBI, I don't know. Jesus Christ, there's bodies everywhere. Turner's warehouse, 11, maybe more. Send everyone." 7:02 a.m. The call reached the Yazoo County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Sarah Mitchell took it, heard the panic in Willie's voice, and radioed Sheriff Beckworth. Beckworth, 56, 11 years as sheriff, had seen his share of Delta violence, bar fights, domestic disputes, drug deals gone wrong. But when he pulled up at 7:18 a.m. and saw Willie pale as death, rocking on his truck's running board, he knew this was different. "How many?" he asked. Willie couldn't speak, just held up both hands. 11. The morning sun illuminated the scene with cruel clarity. Beckworth knew some of these men. Marcus Webb had worked for him 6 months before. Lucky Haynes was a known figure, ran the poker games, had connections Beckworth never been able to prove. Inside, the smell was overwhelming. Blood, gun smoke, decay in the humid Delta heat. 8 bodies scattered across the concrete floor.
Shell casings everywhere, poker table overturned, money scattered like autumn leaves. Beckworth had been a Marine in Vietnam. He'd seen combat. He'd seen what men could do when civilization's thin veneer cracked. But this was methodical. Execution. He stepped carefully, radio in hand. "This is Sheriff Beckworth. I need FBI at Turner's Warehouse, County Road 49. Multiple homicides. 11 confirmed. Scene is extensive. Appears targeted. Send everyone." While Beckworth documented death with a voice kept professional by sheer force of will, 3 miles away in Silver City, Rita Carter made breakfast for Sammy. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice in his favorite cartoon cup. Normal Sunday morning. Sammy asked when they could see Grandpa Samuel. Rita said maybe after church. Dolly Parton sang Jolene on the radio. Coffee smelled good. Everything normal. For a few more hours. By 9:30 a.m., FBI Special Agent Harold Briggs arrived from Jackson. 52 years old, 26 years with the Bureau. He'd seen civil rights murders, Klan violence, thought he had seen the worst, but this was different. Not ideological, personal, calculated. 11 men eliminated with military precision in one night. Briggs studied the scene with Beckworth, counted shell casings, reconstructed the timeline. 2 shooters minimum, Briggs said. Probably 3. Multiple weapons. They came prepared. This wasn't rage. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was planned. "I know who did it," Beckworth said quietly. Briggs looked up. "How?" "Because I saw it coming, just didn't think it would go this far." Beckworth pulled out a folder. "James Carter came to see me Monday, said Lucky Haynes defrauded his father, wanted me to investigate. I told him it was a civil matter, needed a lawyer, and 5 days later, Lucky Haynes is dead on the floor with 10 other men." Briggs read the loan documents, the deed transfer, the paperwork that had robbed Samuel Carter of everything his family had built for 3 generations. "So this was revenge," Briggs said. "This was justice," Beckworth corrected, then stopped himself. "No, that's wrong. This was revenge, but I understand why he thought it was justice." Over the next 3 days, the investigation expanded. Forensics teams processed the warehouse, documented everything, collected evidence with mechanical precision. And as the evidence piled up, the Carter brothers' fate moved from blood-soaked floors to courtroom walls. Ballistics came back Wednesday morning. 3 weapons, a .45 caliber pistol, a .30-06 hunting rifle, and a 12-gauge shotgun.
The .45 and the .30-06 were registered to James Lee Carter. The shotgun was untraceable, borrowed or bought secondhand. The timeline was reconstructed with precision. 9:47 p.m., the Carter brothers arrived. 9:51 p.m., first shots fired. By midnight, all 11 men were dead. 12:15 a.m., the brothers drove away. But Wednesday afternoon, Deputy Sarah Mitchell found something in the county records that changed everything. She uncovered the loan file. Samuel Carter, hospitalized September 6th with a heart attack, admitted at 2:47 p.m., right after discovering his land had been stolen through legal fraud. Mitchell brought it to Briggs and Beckworth. They read in silence. Predatory loan, confusing terms, automatic transfer of the deed when Samuel couldn't make impossible payments. All legal, all theft dressed up in lawyer language. Christ, Mitchell muttered. 11 people died over this. Not over land, Beckworth said. Over honor, over a father's humiliation, over a system that protects predators and grinds down decent men until they break. By 9:30 a.m., the story spread through Yazoo County like wildfire. 11 dead, the Carter brothers responsible. Everyone had an opinion. At the Silver City Cafe, conversations grew heated. Martha Webb, widow of Marcus, cried into cold coffee. Her husband had been killed for taking Lucky's money to look the other way. At the counter, old Henry Pritchard said what others feared to voice. Lucky Haynes was a thief, always has been. We all knew it, and we let him operate because it was easier than standing up. Maybe if we'd done something years ago, this wouldn't have happened. The town split, not cleanly, not neatly. Families of the dead against families who quietly sympathized with the Carters. Pastor Eddie Hinton struggled through Sunday service. We ask why. Why this violence? Why couldn't neighbors help neighbors? Why couldn't the law protect the innocent? Why did 11 men have to die? I don't have answers, just grief and the knowledge that we all failed. Investigations revealed more. Vernon Tucker had helped Lucky write the predatory loan terms. Dale Morrison had witnessed Samuel's signature, knowing the old man couldn't read. Deputy Marcus Webb had taken monthly payments to ensure the poker games ran without interference. Not all the victims were innocent. Not all deserved what happened, but none deserved execution.
September 19th, 1974, 4 days after the massacre. FBI agent Harold Briggs and Sheriff Beckworth drove to the Carter farmhouse with arrest warrants. 8 officers, rifles ready, expecting a standoff, maybe suicide by cop. Instead, they found James Carter sitting on his porch, coffee cup in hand, watching the soybean fields. Bobby sat beside him, both unarmed, both waiting. "Sheriff," James said, standing slowly, "I expect you're here about Saturday night. James, I need you and Bobby to come with us. I know, we're not going to make this difficult. We did what we had to do. Now we face what comes next." Bobby asked for one last phone call. His voice broke as he told Rita he loved her, told her to explain to Sammy that his daddy had tried to protect Grandpa Samuel, that sometimes good men do bad things for good reasons. Beckworth cuffed James personally. "Was it worth it, James?" James looked at his land, the farmhouse his father built, the fields 3 generations had worked. "You ever been pushed to the edge, Tom, where everything you believe in gets stripped away and the system spits you out like you're nothing?" That's not an answer. No, but it's the truth. Lucky destroyed my father, stole everything we built, and the law said that was fine, so I made my own law. 11 men, James, 11 families destroyed. I know, I'll carry that weight the rest of my life, but Lucky Haynes won't destroy another family. That debt's been paid. At 4:47 p.m., James and Bobby Carter were booked into Yazoo County Jail on 11 counts of first-degree murder, held without bail. The trial would make national news. March 18, 1975, 6 months later. Jackson courtroom. Venue changed. No impartial jury possible in Yazoo County. 11 counts each, 22 capital charges combined. The prosecution had confessions, forensic evidence, ballistics, fingerprints, timeline reconstruction, motive documented in legal papers and hospital records. The defense argued temporary insanity brought on by extreme emotional distress, painted a picture of a dying father, a stolen legacy, a predatory system. Called character witnesses who testified James had been a good man, a war hero. The prosecution demolished it in 2 hours. Temporary insanity doesn't involve 5 days of planning, doesn't involve buying a gun in Vicksburg, doesn't involve eliminating every witness in that warehouse. This was premeditated mass murder dressed up in the language of honor and justice. The jury deliberated 9 hours over 2 days. March 27, 1975. Verdict: guilty, all charges, both defendants. 3 weeks later, sentencing. James Lee Carter, death penalty. Robert Franklin Carter, death penalty. When the judge read the sentences, James showed no emotion, no tears, no protest, just a slight nod, as if he knew from the moment he pulled the trigger on Deputy Marcus Webb that this was exactly where the path led. And as the gavel fell, the Carter brothers' story moved from blood-soaked fields to death row. Bobby cried, not for himself, but for Sammy growing up without a father, for Rita raising their son alone, for all the normal life that would never be. The death sentences were automatically appealed. In 1978, they were commuted to life without parole when the Supreme Court ruled on procedural issues in Mississippi death penalty cases. James and Bobby Carter would spend the rest of their lives in prison. No parole hearings, no hope of freedom, just decades stretching ahead in concrete cells, carrying the weight of 11 dead. James Carter served 29 years at the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman. He worked in the carpentry shop, taught inmates woodworking, kept to himself. Guards said he was the quietest inmate they had ever known. Never complained, never fought, just existed in that space between life and death that long-term prisoners inhabit. Rita visited Bobby every month for 18 years, bringing Sammy until the boy turned 16 and refused to go anymore. She never remarried, never left Yazoo County, just worked her shifts at the Piggly Wiggly, raised her son, visited her husband, and carried a grief so deep it became part of her bone structure. On November 3, 2003, James Lee Carter died of a massive heart attack in the prison infirmary. His last coherent words were asking about his father, whether Samuel had ever known what they had done in his name. The chaplain couldn't answer. Samuel Carter had died 3 weeks after the massacre, never knowing the price of his son's revenge. James was buried in the prison cemetery with a simple marker: James L. Carter, 1940 to 2003. No mention of father, son, veteran, farmer, just dates. Robert Franklin Carter remains incarcerated at Parchman as of 2024, 79 years old. Sammy visits twice a year, beautiful but distant, maintaining connection to a father he barely remembers outside prison walls.
In a 2019 documentary interview, Bobby said only, "I followed my brother. That's what I always did. Would I do it different if I could go back? I ask myself that every day. Still don't have an answer." Rita Carter died in 2018, age 74, cancer. Bobby wasn't allowed to attend her funeral. Sammy is 53 now, works as an electrician in Memphis,
married with 2 daughters who know their grandfather is in prison, but not why. The family name carries weight, not pride, just history. Samuel Carter's 180 acres reverted to distant relatives after legal battles that lasted until 1982. They sold it immediately to an agricultural corporation. Today, it's part of a 2,400-acre soybean operation managed by people who never knew the Carter family, who don't know that 3 generations bled into that soil before losing it to a man in a cheap suit with predatory loan documents. The victims' families scattered. Sharon Haynes moved to Memphis, remarried, died in 2009. Marcus Webb's widow, Martha, stayed in Yazoo County, raised 3 children, died in 2016. Vernon Tucker's family fled to Oregon. Dale Morrison's widow remarried quickly, called it survival. Turner's warehouse stood empty for decades, too many ghosts. Burned down in 1998, suspected arson. Today, it's just weeds and teenagers drinking beer, unaware 11 men died there in one night of reckoning. Yazoo County changed for a while. Neighbors helped each other more, banks forgave debts faster, but fear-born change doesn't last. Within a decade, foreclosures resumed, pressures returned, lessons faded like fog burning off Delta fields. FBI agent Harold Briggs retired in 1994. In a 2015 interview, he said, "Legally, the Carter brothers were mass murderers who deserved their sentences. Morally, they were desperate men pushed past all reasonable limits by a system that had completely failed them. The Carter case is the only one where I still don't know if justice was served. The law says yes. My conscience says I don't know." Sheriff Tom Beckwith never ran for re-election after 1976. He died in 1988, haunted by nightmares of Turner's warehouse, wondering if he could have prevented it all by investigating Lucky Haynes when James asked him to. This story has no heroes, just a father who loved his family more than his life, 11 men who made choices, some corrupt, some careless, some simply unlucky. A system that failed at every level, predatory lending, law enforcement that couldn't help, neighbors who turned away, a code of honor so rigid it made violence seem like the only option. Were the Carter brothers murderers? Yes, premeditated, ruthless. Were they desperate men driven to extremes? Also, yes. The disturbing truth is both can be true, and that forces us to ask questions we'd rather avoid. What would we do in their place? How far would we go to protect our family's honor? Does justice exist when the system fails completely? Is there a line between righteous anger and unforgivable violence? Or does desperation erase that line entirely? 50 years have passed. Rural America hasn't healed. Families still face impossible choices. Some still choose violence. Some still decide honor demands blood. The Carter farmhouse still stands, sold 3 times since 1974. Current owners from California know nothing of its history. Their children play in the yard where James and Bobby once sat, drinking beer, making peace with the choice they had already made. Turner's warehouse site is just an empty lot. No memorial, no plaque, no marker. The Delta moved on, covering scars with cotton and soybeans until they almost disappear. Almost. Revenge doesn't bring back what's lost, doesn't heal wounds, doesn't restore stolen land or dying fathers. It only creates new dead, new grief, new families learning to live with pain that never fades. James Carter saved his family's honor, but lost his soul. He eliminated a predator, but created 11 shattered families. He won a battle against injustice, but lost the war against his own humanity. He spent 29 years in a cell thinking about 11 faces, 11 futures erased in 2 hours of violence. Was it worth it? That's the question James Carter died with.
That's the question Bobby Carter lives with every day. That's the question we're left with, each of us examining our own boundaries, wondering how far we'd go, how much we'd sacrifice. And as history fades into legend, the Carter brothers' story remains, a cautionary tale about honor, desperation, and the thin line between justice and revenge. What we'd become if pushed to the edge, where desperation, honor, and violence all blur together. If this story made you think about justice, revenge, and the price we pay for protecting those we love, leave your like and share this video. Subscribe for more true stories that challenge what we think we know about right and wrong, about law and morality, about how far ordinary people will go when pushed past all reasonable limits. Comment below, what would you have done in James Carter's position? Where do you draw the line between justice and vengeance when the system fails completely? What are decent people supposed to do? Because these stories aren't just history, they're happening right now, in forgotten corners where systems collapse, where desperation takes hold, and where ordinary men make choices they can never take back. The names change, the details shift, but the fundamental question remains. What happens when ordinary men are pushed too far? When does the victim become the villain? When does protection become murder? Until next time, remember, the monsters we fear aren't always born that way. Sometimes they're made. One predatory loan, one corrupt official, one refused warning, one desperate decision at a time. The line between hero and villain, between justice and revenge, between protecting family and destroying lives, that line is thinner than we want to believe. And sometimes, in the darkest moments, it disappears entirely.